Walk into any gym in Los Angeles, New York, or Austin at 7 a.m. You will see a room full of people in Lululemon leggings standing on rubber mats. The teacher plays a lo-fi hip-hop track and says, "Inhale, reach up. Exhale, fold forward. Chaturanga, upward dog, downward dog." This sequence is the Surya Namaskar, the sun salutation. For the average American practitioner, this is just a great way to stretch the hamstrings and build core strength. It's secular spirituality, it's wellness. But for the Hindu American Foundation, this is a religious ritual. They argue that you cannot separate the movement from the theology. Surya Namaskar is, quite literally, a bow to Surya, the Vedic sun god. And for certain Christian legal groups, they agree. They have sued public schools in California for teaching yoga, arguing that by making kids do sun salutations, the state is unconstitutionally forcing children to perform Hindu liturgy. So, who is right? Is the sun salutation a 3,000-year-old act of pagan worship preserved in amber? Or is it a 20th century exercise routine invented by bodybuilders that was branded as ancient to sell better? Today on Religion for Breakfast, we are rolling out the mat to investigate the history of your morning stretch. We are going to look at the Vedas, the wrestlers of Mysore, and the surprising influence of Swedish gymnastics on the ancient art of yoga. Let's start with the ancient claim. If you ask a devout yogi, they will point to the Vedas, the oldest scriptures of Hinduism composed around 1500 to 1200 BCE. And they are right about one thing. The Vedas are obsessed with the sun. There are hymns to Surya, the sun god. There are rituals called Sandhuvandanam performed. At sunrise, there is the famous Gayatri mantra, a prayer to the sun for illumination. And yes, ancient Hindus did perform prostrations, dandavat. They would throw themselves on the ground, face down, like a stick danda. But here is the problem. Nowhere in the ancient texts do we find a description of the specific 12-step sequence we do today. We don't see plank pose. We don't see cobra pose transitioning into downward dog. The ancient texts describe sitting asana for meditation. They describe breathing, pranayama. But they don't describe a dynamic, cardiovascular flow of push-ups and lunges. If you were to show a sun salutation to a yogi from the year 1200 AD, he probably wouldn't recognize it as yoga. He might recognize it as something else entirely, wrestling. To find the actual origin of the sequence, we have to jump forward a few thousand years to the 1920s. India was under British colonial rule. A wave of nationalism was sweeping the country. Part of this nationalism was physical culture. Indian leaders wanted to prove that Indian bodies were just as strong and capable as British bodies. Enter the Raja of Ond, Bafan Pant, Pratinidhi. He wasn't a monk. He was a prince and a fitness enthusiast. He was obsessed with building a strong, muscular population. In 1929, he published a book titled The 10-Point Way to Health Suryanama. In this book, he codified the sequence we know today. He didn't present it as yoga, which at the time was seen as a weird, mystical practice for ascetics living in caves. He presented it as a health and strength system. He explicitly combined traditional religious prostrations with the movements of Indian wrestling Vietnam. Indian wrestlers Pollavans had been doing deep knee bends and arching push-ups, dans and Bathex for centuries to build massive shoulders. The Raja took these wrestling drills, strung them together into a flow, synced them with breathing, and called it a salutation to the sun. So, The flow you do in class owes more to the wrestling pit than the meditation cave. But there is another ingredient in this cocktail: Europe. In the 19th and early 20th centuries, a system called Swedish gymnastics developed by Per Henrik Ling was taking over the world. It involved calisthenics, dynamic stretching, and rhythmic movement. The British military used it, the YMCA used it, and the British introduced it to the Indian school system. Historian Mark Singleton, in his groundbreaking book, Yoga Body, argues that modern postural yoga is a hybrid. It is a synthesis of 1. Indigenous Indian exercises Hatha yoga plus wrestling. 2. Western gymnastics drills, jumping jacks, push. The sun salutation looks suspiciously like a burpee with spiritual intent. The genius of the Indian innovators was to reclaim these Western movements, mix them with Indian tradition, and repackage them as ancient wisdom. It was a brilliant anti-colonial strategy. You think your gymnastics are modern? No, we invented this 5,000 years ago. The man who truly brought this into the yoga studio was T. Krishnamurti. If you do yoga today, you are essentially his student. He taught BKS Iyengar yoga, and K. Patabi Joy's Ashtanga yoga. In the 1930s, Krishnamurti was hired by the Maharaja of Mysore to run a yoga school. His students were young, energetic boys, the royal family. They couldn't sit still for meditation. They needed to burn energy. So, Krishnamurti developed a vigorous, aerobic style of yoga vinyasa. He took the sun salutation sequence popularized by the Raja of Ond and made it the warm-up for his yoga classes. He linked the physical movements dance with the spiritual focus drishti. The physical, it warms up the spine and builds heat tapas. The spiritual, he re-injected the mantras. For every movement, there was a specific bija, mantra, seed sound, or a name of the sun god. Om Maitreya Namaha, Om Rave Namaha. This is the crucial moment of synthesis. The form was largely modern gymnastics, wrestling, but the spirit was ancient Vedic worship. This brings us back to the central question: is it religious? The answer depends on intent. In the traditional Hindu context, the sun is not a ball of gas. It is Surya, the eye of the universe, the remover of darkness, avidya. When a Hindu performs Surya Namaskar with the mantras, it is a ritual of gratitude. When you bow forward, you are surrendering your ego. When you lift your chest cobra, you are opening your heart to the divine light. The sweat you generate is an offering yena. The physical movement is merely the vehicle for the prayer. However, when you strip the mantras, the intention, and the theology away, as most Western gyms do, what is left? You are left with a series of lunges and push-ups. Critics call this colonization of the body. We took the exercise part because we liked the abs, but we threw away the God part because it made us uncomfortable. But many Hindu activists argue the opposite. They say, you cannot separate the dancer from the dance. They argue that the geometry of the poses themselves affects the subtle energy, body prana, regardless of what you are thinking. By doing the pose, you are unconsciously participating in the ritual. This debate isn't just academic. It's legal. In 2013, parents in Encinitas, California, sued the school district for teaching yoga. They argued that sun salutations were inherently religious. The judge had to decide, can a movement be religious if the person doing it doesn't know it's religious? The court ruled in favor of the school. The judge said that while yoga has religious roots, the modern American version has been so thoroughly stripped of theology that it is now legally distinct. It is secular exercise. Basically, the court ruled that American capitalism had successfully secularized the divine. We turned a prayer into a calisthenic. So, when you roll out your mat tomorrow morning, what are you doing? Are you a pagan worshipper bowing to the sun god? Are you a Swedish gymnast doing a burpee? Or are you an Indian wrestler preparing for a match? The answer is yes. The sun salutation is a fascinating cultural artifact. It is a bridge between East and West, ancient and modern, science and faith. It reminds us that religions are not static museums. They evolve, they borrow, they adapt. The ancient sun salutation is actually a 100-year-old invention, but that doesn't make it fake. It makes it a living tradition. Whether you are doing it to find God or just to touch your toes, you are participating in a global ritual that connects a 1920s Indian prince to a 2024 suburban mum. And that, in itself, is kind of miraculous. If you enjoyed this stretch through history, hit subscribe, and don't forget to breathe. And I'll see you next time.